Hello everyone, tonight we're going to meet someone stronger than you, smarter in ways you'll never quite understand, and far more at home in the dark than you'll ever be. They're not ghosts, though they've been gone for over 40,000 years. They're not monsters, even though you've seen them drawn that way. And they're not your ancestors, not exactly. They were something else, a parallel version of us, shaped by cold muscle and silence. You probably wouldn't survive 10 minutes in their world. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I'm doing here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soft noise and get to work tonight. You're not wearing shoes, that's the first thing you notice. Your feet crunch against snow, but the cold doesn't sting it, presses gently like a quiet insistence. You're in a narrow gorge, cliffs rising on either side, and all the sound is soft wind, distant dripping, maybe breath. Yours? No, not yours. Because you're not alone. There's something just ahead. A broad back rising and falling with each slow, deliberate inhale. Hair thick like moss, shoulders wide like the door of a refrigerator, legs bent ready to spring. A hand reaches down to touch the snow, 2 fingers press lift and bring something up to the nose. You're watching a Neanderthal hunt. Not with a spear yet. That comes later. Right now, it's just reading the land, learning the shape of the moment. You've read maps before, maybe even followed some hiking trail with painted signs. But this is cartography written in crushed grass and hoofprint. The Neanderthal crouches lower and you feel it not in your muscles, but in your bones that hush before movement. That ancient instinct to wait. Because here's the truth that history forgot to tell you: Neanderthals weren't slow, stupid cave brutes. They were fast, they were observant. They were experts in a kind of intelligence that doesn't come with Wi-Fi. They were your cousins. And like most cousins, they were both familiar and totally strange. Homo neanderthalensis split from your branch of the human family tree about 600,000 years ago. You kept walking east. They stayed in Europe, carving out a life between glaciers and rivers, wolves and silence. Their world didn't have safety nets or standing desks. It had cliffs and hunger and the occasional woolly rhino looking to throw its weight around. But here's the thing, they didn't just survive in that chaos. They built a rhythm inside it. They flourished. You watch one now as she picks up a flint core, angles it against a knee, and with 3 swift strikes, turns stone into tool. Not some crude chunk either. A precise blade sharper than anything you've got in your kitchen drawer. She doesn't name it, doesn't need to. She just knows. And that's the second thing you notice: they don't talk much. Maybe a grunt, a look, a hand motion that means wait or move, but no speeches, no introductions. You're the only one narrating this. And it's strange, isn't it, how your mind wants to make sense of it? You want to ask what her name is, whether she dreams, if she knows what a star is, if she wonders why the wind comes from one side of the valley but not the other. She might not have words for any of that, but she knows something else: how to listen to the bones of a hill, how to read the shape of a branch that snapped yesterday, how to move without leaving a mark. The others are gathering now. Not a big group, maybe 4, maybe 6. All of them quiet eyes scanning the slope. No shouting, no drums, no "let's go team," just presence, stillness, and strength. Neanderthals lived in small groups like this family bands, really rarely more than a dozen or so. They didn't build cities. They didn't need them. Every cave was a shelter. Every fire was a home. And every silence was full. Here's something that might surprise you. These people weren't just surviving day to day. They had plans. They passed on knowledge. They cared for the wounded bones. have been found with clear signs of healing, meaning someone sat beside a hurt brother or mother or child bringing food, keeping fire, not for profit, just because. Because somewhere in their quiet, heavy-chested way, they felt something. It might not be love the way we define it now, but it was close enough. The wind shifts, a figure gestures, the group moves. You follow. Down into a ravine where footprints scatter across frozen mud. A trail. Someone was here. An animal, too. Maybe deer. Maybe something bigger. There's a pause. You watch as one of them touches a branch, then breaks off a sprig and smells it. It's not drama, it's not ceremony, it's a conversation with the earth. You begin to wonder, how did we lose that? How did we go from this quiet, tuned-in way of being to phones that buzz when you don't answer emails fast enough? How did we forget what it feels like to learn without being taught? Maybe we didn't lose it. Maybe it's still in there somewhere in your wrist or the base of your skull. A memory of a time when knowing wasn't stored in servers but in sinew. The hunt continues. They've picked up speed. One of them raises a spear. Yes, here it is, and your breath catches. Not because of danger, but because of the elegance. You didn't think it'd look like ballet, but it does. And just as the spear arcs through the air faster than you thought those thick arms could move, you blink. Hard. The scene is gone, replaced by your room. The soft hum of your fan. Maybe a car outside, maybe the ache in your neck from looking at screens all day. You exhale. And in that moment, you realize it's not the Neanderthals who feel like the strange ones. It's us. You sit up in bed for a second just to make sure your arms are still shaped like yours and not those log-thick limbs you just watched throw a spear like a javelin made of thunder. And yep, same old you, still can't open the peanut butter jar on the first try. Meanwhile, the Neanderthal you just watched, he probably wouldn't even notice the lid. He'd twist the entire jar into submission with the same fingers he uses to pull firewood from frozen ground. They were small by modern standards, about 5'4", give or take. But standing next to them, you'd feel like a hollow scarecrow. Their bones weren't just thicker, they were denser, like someone had taken a human skeleton and dipped it in iron. Their rib cages flared like barrels. Their arms, especially the upper arms, were so powerful anthropologists joke they didn't need gym memberships. Nature gave them one at birth. It's not hard to imagine a Neanderthal carrying half a deer carcass over one shoulder without breaking a sweat, while you would need an Uber XL just to get it home from the butcher. But they weren't clumsy. That's the myth. You've probably seen the drawings, the stooped posture, the dragging knuckles, the half-open mouth, like they're still deciding whether or not to invent vowels. Total nonsense. That image came from an early reconstruction of an old man with arthritis. Yep, one guy had a bad back and suddenly an entire species got branded as slow-witted gorillas. Talk about bad PR. In reality, Neanderthals moved with quiet, calculated efficiency. Their knees were flexible in ways ours aren't. Their ankles were strong, allowing them to crouch for long periods without strain. Try that sometime, just hang out in a squat for an hour or two and see what part of you screams first. Neanderthals could hunt like that, camp like that, probably even gossip like that. And yes, they almost certainly gossiped. Their joints were adapted for cold, thick cartilage, strong hips. You weren't going to catch one of them twisting an ankle on a frosty morning walk. You'd slip on the ice and hit your tailbone. They'd catch a rabbit mid-hop. Their hands are particularly worth mentioning. Each finger was broad and flat, like someone shaped it with a stone mallet. The thumb was rotated differently than ours, more powerful, more gripping. More, let me snap this dry branch into 5 arrow shafts, and less, I struggle with child-proof medicine bottles. This wasn't just brute strength, it was functional. A kind of wisdom written into bone structure. They didn't lift weights, they lifted survival. And it left a record. You see, we found bones, lots of them, broken ones, but healed. That's important. A fractured arm, a shattered eye socket, a cracked leg, all showing signs of mending. That tells us something extraordinary. They didn't leave their wounded behind. A modern sprinter tears an Achilles and it's 6 weeks of whining and sushi deliveries. A Neanderthal gets trampled by a mammoth and the group carries him to shelter, tends to him, feeds him until he walks again. Not because they read it in a handbook, but because it was normal. Caring was part of the strength. It's easy to imagine a Neanderthal with 3 cracked ribs still crawling toward a fire while a younger one, maybe his daughter, places a hand on his shoulder and mutters something that means, "You're not done yet." You'd think living that hard would break them, and in a way it did. Life expectancy wasn't high, but in those years they lived fully. Every tendon earned its keep. Every scar was a trophy. You're picturing them now, aren't you? Not the museum models with glass eyes and weird rubbery skin, but real people, sitting around a fire, steam rising off damp hides, someone roasting marrow bones, someone sharpening a stone, someone laughing, because yes, of course they laughed, when one of them slipped on a log. Laughter when someone tried to impress the group and tripped over their own feet. Definitely laughter. If you think humor is a modern invention, you've never spent enough time with people who have no electricity. They had to laugh. Imagine surviving a blizzard, fending off wolves, chasing down an elk for 3 days, then discovering your cave is flooded. You either cry or you laugh until your sides hurt. Some of them did both. And let's not forget the children. Yes, there were Neanderthal toddlers. They threw rocks. They screamed. They climbed things they shouldn't have. And when they got tired, they fell asleep next to a mother whose arms could crush a bear trap. But those arms also cradled them. Imagine that contrast. Immense physicality wrapped around a sleeping child like a fortress made of flesh and warmth. You've probably seen kids today cry because their iPad battery died. A Neanderthal child cried because a fox stole their last cooked root. Different problems. Same feelings. Historians still debate whether Neanderthals truly had language or if they relied more on gesture tone and shared context. But anyone who's ever had a dog knows you don't need full sentences to be understood. Maybe they didn't say "I love you." Maybe they just passed the meat around without keeping the biggest chunk for themselves. You're thinking about your own body now. How it moves, how it tires, how it sits in chairs too much and aches for reasons you can't explain. And maybe, just maybe, you feel a flicker of envy. Not for the cold, not for the danger, but for the raw truth of a life that required every muscle, every breath, every heartbeat to mean something. Your body was designed for movement too, for grip, for crouch, for warmth. You're not made of glass. You just live like you are. Maybe tomorrow you'll stretch your legs a little more. Maybe you'll grip a branch and feel something hum in your palms. And maybe when you sleep, you'll dream not of traffic or spreadsheets, but of a short, solid figure beside a fire-cracking bone with bare hands smiling at you like you've just remembered who you are. You're standing in a cave now. It's not the kind of cave you've seen on postcards. No neon lights or walkways, no velvet ropes guarding stalactites. Just rock and hush, and the constant drip of water echoing like a metronome for a world that forgot how to rush. You don't see them at first, but you feel them. The Neanderthals. Not stomping, not shouting, just present. And as your eyes adjust to the gloom, you catch a flicker, a gesture, A figure crouched near the wall, turning something over in his hands. It's not a weapon, it's not food, it's a shell. Nothing fancy, just a small spiraled thing worn smooth by time or tide. But the way he holds it, you know it means something. Or at least it did once. This is the part you didn't expect. Their minds weren't just sharp, they were strange. In ways that make modern humans look downright narrow. Let's get the facts straight. Neanderthals had bigger brains than us. Not smarter, not dumber, just different. Average cranial capacity around 1/500 cubic centimeters. That's about 10% larger than the modern human brain. Which might sound impressive until you realize they weren't solving algebra problems. They were solving everything else. Their brains were wired for the physical, the sensory, the spatial. The parts of the mind that help you sense danger before it appears, memorize landscapes without ever drawing a map, or spot the shimmer of fish scales under ice 40 yards away. It wasn't the kind of intelligence that gets you a scholarship. It was the kind that gets you home alive. Think of it like this: if a modern human and a Neanderthal went hiking, you'd be the one with a GPS. They'd be the one who remembered which moss only grows on the north-facing rocks. You'd be the one looking for signal. They'd be the one noticing the wind change. You're beginning to see the difference now, aren't you? The modern brain is built for abstraction. Symbols, language, numbers. We obsess over what we can't touch. Ideas about ideas, thoughts about feelings. The Neanderthal brain. It was rooted, grounded, sensory, a world of weight, texture, sound, scent. It's not that they didn't feel things, it's that their feelings were braided into motion. To imagine how their minds worked, you need to forget words for a moment. Just listen, smell. Run your fingers across stone. That's the language, that's the intelligence. And it wasn't just reaction, it was anticipation. You crouch beside a Neanderthal woman now. She's watching a fire, not tending it, watching it. You get the sense she could read smoke the way you read text messages. One flick, one hiss, and she knows it's time to add bark, not branch. Later, she'll sit down with a flat rock, a shard of flint, and without thinking, just knowing she'll shape a scraper tool with clean, repetitive strikes. You can almost hear the rhythm, like a beat passed down through centuries, like her fingers remember things her mouth never had to say. Historians still debate whether this kind of cognition qualifies as advanced, whether tool making and spatial awareness count the same as abstract reasoning. But here's a question they never ask: does it matter? When you can spot a wolf track in the dark, when you can navigate a frozen forest using the stars, the wind, and a gut instinct shaped by millennia, when you can feed your family without farming, writing, or banking, what kind of genius isn't that? A group of Neanderthals is now sitting in a shallow alcove, no talking, but every glance means something. A rock passed from hand to hand, a fur adjusted over someone's shoulder. One looks up, sniffs the air, then relaxes. You wonder what passed between them. Maybe a signal for storm coming. Maybe just the quiet language of a people who never needed small talk. You think of your own brain. Buzzing, clicking, stuffed full of passwords and playlists, old regrets, and half-read articles. And here in this place, it all feels noisy. Their minds were silent in a way that makes yours ache with jealousy. Maybe that's what sleep used to feel like. Not a surrender, a return. You lie back for a moment on the dirt. The floor is cold, but your body adjusts. You close your eyes and listen. Drip, crackle, breath. And in that soft rhythm, you remember they didn't just have brains. They had attention. Deep, slow, deliberate attention. The kind that notices when a bird stops singing. The kind that sees a leaf out of place and knows it means prey nearby. The kind that lets you stand still for 15 minutes without fidgeting. You haven't done that in years. You can barely sit through a loading screen. And yet, somewhere deep in your own skull, that same wiring flickers. Not the loud parts. Not the anxious monologue that worries about tomorrow's meeting or the embarrassing thing you said in 2014. No deeper than that. The part that still knows how to be present, still knows how to feel rain before it falls, still knows how to sit quietly in a cave and know you're safe. You open your eyes and the scene is gone again. Swallowed by your ceiling fan, the hum of electronics, the faint glow of a forgotten charging cable. You're back. But something in you feels older, like your brain just remembered a shape it used to hold. And tomorrow, when someone asks why you paused mid-step to notice a breeze or the smell of soil, you'll shrug and smile and say you don't know, because you do. You just don't have a word for it. It's evening again, and the firelight dances. Not yours, theirs. Theirs is deeper, steadier. Wood crackles like old bones, whispering stories in tongues you've never heard. Smoke curls along the ceiling of the cave, leaving a soft soot line like a memory drawn in charcoal. You're sitting near the edge. The shadows move differently here, stitched by motion and meaning. Someone hums, not music, not exactly, just a low, repetitive sound that seems more felt than heard. Like heartbeat translated through breath. And across from you, a young Neanderthal bends toward a stone slab, red powder staining his fingers. Red ochre. He dips his thumb in it and smears a line across the rock. Not randomly, intentionally, slow, deliberate strokes, then another, and another. You watch hypnotized as a shape forms. Not a perfect animal, not a stick figure. Something else. A symbol. Or maybe just a mark of presence. A way of saying I was here. I am. You don't know why, but your chest tightens a little. They painted. Yes, these so-called brutes made art. Not just once, not by accident, but repeatedly. In Spain, in France, in caves where no modern human ever set foot long before Homo sapiens arrived. Red handprints, dots, stencils, shapes. Meaningful, patterned, ancient. They didn't need to do it. It didn't help them hunt. It didn't ward off predators, but they did it anyway. Because maybe survival isn't enough. Maybe expression is part of what it means to live. And it wasn't just ochre. Archaeologists have found eagle talons modified, strung together. Jewelry, status symbols, ritual decoration. Historians still debate whether it was spiritual or social, but someone at some point looked at a claw and thought, this is more than bone. You think of your own closet, the necklace you only wear on certain days, the shirt that feels lucky, the ring that belonged to someone you lost. You're not so different, are you? Now a woman rises from the fire and moves to the edge of the cave. She kneels by something wrapped in hide, a small body, a child. She brushes the hair gently, then places a shell beside its face. Not food, not medicine, a gift. You can feel your throat go tight. Because here is the strange, quiet truth: Neanderthals buried their dead. Not always, not everywhere, but often enough that we can no longer pretend it was a fluke. Some graves contain flowers. Some have tools placed beside the body. One even had the bones of a panther arranged above it. Does it mean they believed in an afterlife? Hard to say. Maybe it wasn't religion. Maybe it was just respect, or grief, or both. You've been told emotion is a modern thing. That love and mourning and spiritual longing came with cities and stories and books. But you're watching a woman cry now, and no book taught her how. She covers the child's face. She rocks, the others give her space. No rush, no explanations. Grief takes its time. The fire doesn't judge. You feel something stir inside you. A kind of ache. Not sadness exactly, just the weight of realizing that these people so long gone were not other. They were just early. You shift your gaze to the center of the fire circle. A man is sharpening a spear, not with speed, with care. The flint edge gleams, catching the light. He checks the angle, tests the balance. It's not just a weapon, it's an extension of him. They made complex tools, multi-part ones, hafted spear points blades crafted from different materials, tools to scrape hides, to cut tendons, to shape wood. There's even evidence of glue made from birch pitch. You know what it takes to make that controlled fire? Patience. Process. You're still trying to assemble IKEA furniture without swearing, and they were making resin with no manual, no timer, and no YouTube tutorial. And fire wasn't just warmth. It was protection. It was light in the dark. It was transformation raw meat to cooked sharp stone to shaped blade. It was safety science and sacred symbol all in one. You wonder how they kept it going in the wind, how they passed the skill to their children. Was it taught, shown, whispered in some primal code of gestures and rhythm? There's a boy now, small and alert, watching his father feed the fire. He leans forward, mimicking the motion. The father lets him, even hands him a stick. You smile, because that's how we all learn at first, through imitation. Through watching someone we trust make meaning from sparks and stone. The boy laughs when the fire flares, not loudly, just a small, delighted sound. And just like that, the cave shifts. It's not a dark place anymore. It's alive, warm, communal, lit not just by flames, but by something older than light belonging. You look around and realize you're the stranger here. You with your glowing devices and synthetic sheets. You with your schedule and self-doubt. They don't need clocks. They don't need reminders to breathe. They already know when to sleep, when to rise, when to pause for silence. You envy them. Not for the danger, not for the cold, but for the clarity. You blink, the fire fades, your room reappears. But for just a moment, you can still smell smoke on your skin. And behind your eyelids, a red handprint lingers. A memory someone left behind 40,000 years ago, just in case we ever forgot who we are. It's morning now, but not in your world. The sky above this Neanderthal camp is a slow gray, heavy with snow that hasn't decided whether to fall yet. The light is soft, almost apologetic. You're watching a woman crouch near a cluster of roots, gently tapping a stone tool against one, until the dirt lets go. There's no rush. She knows how long it takes to coax a stubborn plant from the earth. Behind her, you hear a baby stir, a soft grunt, a breath, the shuffle of someone swaddled in fur and dreaming of nothing yet. And then you feel it again, that strange sense of familiarity. You've met these people before. Not in books, not in documentaries. In yourself. Because they didn't disappear entirely. They merged with us, with you. Modern humans and Neanderthals crossed paths tens of thousands of years ago, most likely in Europe and parts of Western Asia. And when they did, they didn't just compete. They connected. The evidence is inside you. Right now, if your ancestry traces to Europe, Asia, or even the Middle East, about 1% to 4% of your DNA comes from Neanderthals. Not metaphorically, literally. Their code is braided into your blood like a half-remembered song. You are part ghost, part Ice Age survivor, part distant cousin who could lift a boar with one arm and mourn a sibling with the other. And this ghost inside you, It shows up in unexpected ways. Neanderthal genes influence how you sleep. Some of them help regulate your circadian rhythm, how your body interprets light darkness, and the urge to rest. Night owl tendencies. Morning grogginess that could be a whisper from 40,000 years ago. Other genes affect your immune system, which makes sense. These were people exposed to ice age bacteria, cold weather pathogens, unknown viruses. Their DNA learned to fight in climates most of us wouldn't dare to vacation in. You carry those defenses, but not all of it's helpful. Some Neanderthal genes are linked to conditions like type 2 diabetes, depression, and even nicotine addiction. A heavy price for ancient survival tools repurposed in a modern world they never saw coming. Historians and geneticists still debate whether these traits offered more benefit or burden. But that's not the point, is it? The point is they're still here. You carry their shadows in your skin tone, in the way your fat distributes, and how your body processes sunlight. Ever wonder why some people sunburn faster or why others store fat differently in cold climates? Clues point to Neanderthal ancestry, adapting to low UV environments, where survival meant holding on to heat and conserving energy. And you're part of that evolutionary experiment. You think about your own routines now, your body, the times you wake up without knowing why, the places you ache, the foods you crave in winter, the way your fingers sometimes seem to know something your brain hasn't caught up to. Maybe those are old instincts, ones you didn't earn but inherited. You picture your ancestors crossing snowy plains, bones aching, breath visible in the air like tiny spirits. And standing just beyond the firelight, Neanderthals. Not enemies, not strangers, just neighbors. Somewhere between a partnership and a curiosity. Did they talk? Did they laugh together? Did they fall in love? One study suggests the answer is yes. Interbreeding wasn't a one-time accident. It happened often over generations, a relationship of proximity, of time of mingling. You imagine it now, two camps setting up near the same water source, watching each other at first, studying movements, tools, behavior, then maybe sharing a meal, then maybe more. A Neanderthal mother brushing hair out of her child's face, knowing that child has a bit of something new in them. A stranger's eyes, a different rhythm in the heart. Not worse, just unfamiliar. That mix, that strange blend of DNA gave rise to the modern world. To you. And it makes you wonder, what else have you forgotten? You are how much of your own strength is inherited, how much of your fatigue is a misalignment with a world that no longer matches your design. You weren't built for LED lights and inboxes. You were built to wake when the sun did, to rest when darkness fell, to carry craft, protect, repair, and grieve with your hands. No wonder modern life feels off sometimes. You're a ghost in your own house. But that's not a tragedy, it's an invitation to remember, to reclaim, to rest in a way that isn't laziness, but lineage. Tonight, when you feel your eyes start to close, don't fight it. That's not weakness, that's memory. When you eat something warm and heavy in the dead of winter, don't count calories. Count centuries. Because somewhere in your bloodstream, a whisper travels and it says, you come from the cold. You come from the fire. You come from people who were never meant to survive but did anyway. The air is thinner now. You're walking through what used to be a forest, but it's changing. The trees are sparser. The snow hangs longer in the shadows. There's something off in the wind. Not dramatic, just different. And the Neanderthals feel it too. They don't have calendars, they don't write forecasts, but they notice when the herds stop migrating the usual way, when the rivers shift their paths ever so slightly, when the animals grow thinner. You're watching them adjust one gesture at a time. A new cave, a different trail, hunting smaller game. They're not panicking, they're adapting. But it's getting harder. You see the numbers thinning, the campfires are fewer, the silences are longer. There are fewer children chasing each other near the edges of the firelight, fewer footprints in the snow that lead anywhere. And behind them, like a quiet echo, comes something new. Us, modern humans, Homo sapiens. You don't arrive with swords, or torches, or conquest, just with more bodies, more words, more tools, and a different rhythm. It's like two songs playing in the same space. One fast, one slow, one built for complexity, the other for endurance. The contact between Neanderthals and modern humans wasn't a war as far as we can tell. No great battle, no historical fireworks, just a slow, quiet replacement. And that somehow is sadder. Historians still debate why the Neanderthals vanished. Was it the climate shifting crueler every few decades? Was it competition for the same food? Was it simply that we outbred them, outnumbered them, absorbed them? No one knows for sure. But the evidence tells us this. They didn't die in a blaze of defeat. They faded, a little more with each generation. And while we survived, we didn't walk away unchanged. Their genes, their skills, their fire making, their instincts, those lingered, like footprints in mud that slowly dry. You sit now with one of the last groups, a small family, a mother with a limp, a man with frostbitten toes, a girl who still plays with beads made from fox teeth. They eat quietly. They don't speak, not because they don't know how, but because what's there to say? They've noticed the changes. They've felt the forests recede, the prey vanish, the nights grow longer. They've seen strange new people on the ridge, faster, taller, with painted skins and unfamiliar eyes. There's no anger in their faces, just fatigue. They know what's coming, but they don't fear it. And that's the part that stops you. Because there's something deeply stoic about how they accept the world shifting beneath them. They don't curse the sky, they don't shake their fists at fate. They move. They adjust, they mourn quietly, they keep going until there's nowhere left to go. And when that day comes, they don't beg history to remember them. They simply disappear. And here you are watching them leave, not in screams, but in smoke, because that's how most endings come, not with explosions, but with silence. And even now, part of you wants to shout, wait. You want to change the course, offer them medicine, shelter, a Wikipedia page, but they wouldn't understand any of it. They're not asking to be saved. They're not asking anything. And maybe that's the lesson. You weren't made to win every fight. You weren't designed to outlast everything. Sometimes you're simply meant to burn brightly for a time and then step aside. So others can carry the flame. That's what they did. They passed the torch, quietly, almost invisibly. They disappeared without applause, but not without legacy. You still feel them in your bones. You still see them in the firelight. You still carry their breath in your dreams. And tonight, when the wind sounds just a little hollow, you'll remember the girl with the fox teeth necklace smiling at the cold like it owed her nothing. Because it didn't. And she knew it. You're in a museum now. Not physically, your body is still wrapped in a blanket, half slumped into your pillow, listening to the low hum of electronics you forgot to turn off. But your mind is wandering past glass cases and stale carpet. And there they are. The Neanderthals. Or rather, what someone thinks they were. Behind the plexiglass, a wax figure. Short, hunched, a mouth hanging open like it's confused by its own existence. Muscles bulging in weird places. a club held like a forgotten umbrella. You stare at it and something sours in your stomach. Because now you know better. That figure. It's not real. It's a caricature. The result of 19th century guesswork, stiff scientific bias, and let's be honest, some real colonial level arrogance. It all started with a skeleton found in a cave in Germany in the mid-1800s. The bones were thick, heavy. The skull, massive brow ridges, weird angles. At the time, scientists had only one framework, the ladder of evolution. From less evolved to more evolved, from ape to man. And they needed a rung. Guess who got stuck in the middle? The Neanderthals were cast as the caveman cliché almost overnight. The drawings showed stooped brutes dragging their wives by the hair. Clubs, grunts, no fire, no art, just brawn and bad posture, except the original bones. They belonged to an old man with severe arthritis. Arthritis. Not primitivism, not stupidity, just inflammation and time. But the myth took root. Because it was convenient, because it made Homo sapiens feel superior, because every empire wants to believe it's the final form of evolution. So, for over a century, Neanderthals became a punchline, the slow cousin, the primitive blip, the thing we outgrew. Science nodded along, museums doubled down, and you believed it. Until now. Because now you've seen them, not just in fossils, but in firelight, in beads, in burials, in shared blood, in memories that hum in your cells when you walk barefoot in cold grass or pause to watch a deer step silently through the fog. They weren't idiots. They were extraordinary. And what's worse than being forgotten, being misremembered. Historians and anthropologists have spent the last few decades correcting the record. One study at a time, one jawbone at a time, one DNA sequence at a time. They've found craftsmanship, social networks, healthcare, music possibly, language probably, beauty absolutely. But the myth still lingers. It lingers in how we talk about primitive behavior. It lingers in how we imagine early humans as less intelligent, less emotional, less human. You see it in yourself too sometimes. That quiet judgment of your own early self. As if the you from 5 years ago was some unfinished version that deserves ridicule. But maybe we're all just ancient stories being revised. And maybe the people who came before us deserve the same courtesy we wish for ourselves. A second look, a reevaluation, an apology. You wander to another part of the museum, another display, this one updated. The Neanderthal woman stands upright, wrapped in fur, holding a child. Her face is alert, her brow strong. Not cruel, just confident. There's a subtle warmth in her expression, like she knows something you don't. And maybe she does. Because if she were here right now, if she stepped out of that case and into your living room barefoot and quiet, what would she say? Probably nothing. She'd just watch you. Notice the bags under your eyes, the way your spine curls forward from too much chair time, the glow of your phone lighting up your face like a campfire for the disconnected. And then she'd do something very simple. She'd hand you a bowl of food. Not to teach you a lesson, just to remind you that living doesn't have to be this complicated. That survival doesn't have to mean stress. That presence is its own kind of intelligence. You sit down again in your own time, in your own body, and you realize how long it's been since you moved through your day like they did, without shame, without rush, without needing to be seen as anything more than alive. You don't need to earn your breath. You just need to feel it. One inhale, one exhale, and somewhere far away, a figure with a heavy brow and a soft heart nods in approval. Not because you've proven anything, but because for a moment you remembered how to be. You're walking now, not with purpose exactly, but with awareness. Each step presses softly into the earth. You're not wearing shoes. The ground is cold but not cruel. Your toes curl around roots and rocks like they're old acquaintances. There's something grounding about it. You're not alone. The presence of the Neanderthals still lingers, not in ghostly visions, but in the posture of the forest, the way a bird stills before flight, the hush between wind gusts. You can almost feel someone walking beside you, silent, broad-shouldered, with a gaze that sees more than it explains. And the question comes, were they failures? That's what you were taught, that they went extinct, that evolution left them behind. But now it feels like a lazy verdict. Because here's the truth. Neanderthals thrived for over 300,000 years. Let that number echo in your mind for a second. 300,000. How long has Homo sapiens been around? Technically, yes, longer, but not in cities, not with lights, not with email. For most of our existence, we lived much like them. And here's the kicker, most species don't last anywhere near that long. Entire branches of evolution rise and vanish in less time than it takes a glacier to turn around. But the Neanderthals, they lasted through climate collapses, megafaunal extinctions, volcanic winters. They didn't just survive the Ice Age, they were the Ice Age. And they weren't primitive in how they dressed either. Their clothing. It was practical, layered, insulated, tailored in a sense not with sewing machines or runway flair, but with careful preparation and smart cuts. They used animal tendons as thread, bone needles. They weren't walking around wrapped in raw fur like a pile of wet laundry. They dressed for survival with intention. You think of your own winter jacket, triple insulated, heat-sealed microfiber, this and that. Would it last you 3 months in the open? Exactly. And their shelters far more sophisticated than the cave dweller trope suggests. Yes, they used caves, but they also built structures. Wood frames, hide coverings, hearths, organized spaces for food, sleep, and tools. Archaeological sites in Ukraine and France have shown elaborate home bases. They had a sense of space, of order, of comfort. These weren't people just passing through. They inhabited the land. You sit for a while near a fire, your fire now, but it flickers with ancient rhythm. You poke it with a stick and watch the sparks rise like thoughts you don't need to chase. And here's where the Stoic part begins to hum. Neanderthals didn't cling. They didn't demand that the earth be different than it was. When the ice came, they moved. When the game grew scarce, they followed. When the tools broke, they made new ones. There's a line in Stoicism: the obstacle is the way. For the Neanderthals, there was no other option. They didn't philosophize about discomfort. They adapted to it. Their entire life was a form of premeditatio malorum, the practice of imagining and preparing for hardship. Except they didn't need to imagine it. They lived in it. And they carried on anyway. You imagine one of them sitting beside you now. Would they ask about your worries? Would they understand your stress about inboxes, deadlines, algorithm changes? Probably not. But they'd understand hunger and pain and joy and the way firelight makes faces softer and more honest. You want to ask them something, maybe the question that's been simmering since this all began. What does it mean to live a good life? They wouldn't answer with words. They'd hand you something. A flint blade still warm from carving, a cooked root, a stone bead with a hole worn smooth from being touched over and over in silence. A gesture, not of wisdom passed down through texts, but through doing. Their life was the answer. And you realize that's the message they left, not in books or monuments, but in what they modeled: be useful, be aware, be present, take care of others, take care of the fire. When the world changes, change with it, not because you gave up, but because you paid attention. You lean back the night cooling around you, you look up at the stars. The same stars they saw, unnamed, unmapped, just bright and ancient and pulsing with a kind of clarity modern minds have dulled. You feel something shift. It's not an epiphany, it's a returning, a soft thrum of ancestral rhythm echoing under your ribs. You're not a better version of them, you're just a later one. And if you quiet yourself enough, if you listen, not with ears but with bone, you'll hear what they always knew. You don't conquer nature, you become part of it, and then you fade. And that's not failure, that's honor. It's very quiet now. Not the kind of silence you find in a muted room, but the older kind, the kind that happens when nothing artificial hums. When even the birds have gone still. The silence that lives just beneath your daily thoughts, waiting for you to stop scrolling long enough to hear it. The Neanderthals lived in the silence, and not because they had no words, but because not every truth needs to be spoken. You sit on a flat rock, somewhere near the edge of a cliff. Below you, a valley spills out soft with morning mist. You can't see them, but you know they're down there. A small group, gathering water, napping stone, preparing a meal that doesn't come in packaging. And here's the strange part: no one's in charge. No boss, no written rules, no org chart. Just a collective rhythm. Cooperation without hierarchy, effort without ego. Even now, modern anthropology still scratches its head. How did they organize themselves? Who led? Who decided when to move camp? Historians still debate whether Neanderthals had formal social structures like tribes, or whether their cooperation emerged more fluidly rooted in trust, survival, and shared skill. But maybe they didn't need to name everything to do it well. Maybe wisdom doesn't always wear a label. You see them move together like a school of fish. No shouting, no delays. One woman notices a storm cloud gathering beyond the ridge. She gestures. Within moments, the others are packing. Not because she's a leader, but because she noticed and they listened. You try to remember the last time someone gave you quiet advice and you accepted it without question. Hard, isn't it? We've built a culture that equates volume with certainty, but they knew better. You don't have to raise your voice to be heard. You just have to be right in the rhythm of things. There's a boy now no older than 8 balancing a basket of kindling on his hip. He walks with purpose. No one tells him what to do. He knows, he's seen it 100 times. Learned not from lectures, but from living alongside. Learning by absorption, by breath, by example. No syllabus, just watching, imitating, becoming. It's a kind of education you've forgotten. Maybe that's what feels so oddly comforting about them. They didn't rush understanding. They grew into it. There's a kind of truth that only emerges from repetition, grinding, scraping, tending, cooking, stitching, mending. And over time, it sinks in deeper than conscious thought. It becomes reflex. You look at your hands. What have they learned? What have they done, really? Typed, scrolled, clicked, tapped. But do they remember how to build, to make, to soothe, to stitch a wound, to build a fire in rain, to hold a bowl for someone else before you eat? That's the part that hits hardest. Not the physical contrast, but the moral one. Because the Neanderthals, however you measure them, lived in harmony with what they had. They didn't invent debt. They didn't exploit labor. They didn't hoard. They didn't need 10 versions of anything. If something broke, they fixed it. If someone suffered, they stayed. And if the world changed, they didn't whine about it in long threads. They changed with it. This wasn't some utopia. They suffered. They died young. They lost children. Teeth, time. But they didn't ask the world to be softer. They became stronger in quiet ways. Their minds weren't loud, but they were tuned to animals, to weather, to tension, to each other. You wonder what would happen if you tuned in more, not with noise-canceling headphones, not with to-do lists and breathwork apps, but with silence, a real one. Like now, a silence where you can hear yourself before you rehearse your response. You look out again over the valley. The mist is thinning. Someone's singing a low hum, almost a drone. You don't recognize the tune, but it steadies you. No chorus, no hook, just presence wrapped in sound. You close your eyes, and for a moment you wonder, have we mistaken speaking for connection? Have we traded understanding for explanations? Have we forgotten that some of the deepest truths don't live in language at all? There's a child sitting next to her grandmother now. No words exchanged. Just proximity. Hands working together on a fur seam. One pair wrinkled, practiced. One pair clumsy, learning. Nothing written down. Everything passed on. The seam will outlive the sentence. And as night begins to fall, you feel a shift again, not in temperature, but in tempo. The fire is already built. The food is already cooking. There's no need for a meeting. Everyone already knows their role. You exhale slowly, not out of relief, but respect. Because now you understand Neanderthals weren't failed experiments. They were experts in the only skill that matters, being where they were. Fully, unapologetically attuned, and you're remembering how. You're back in your own world again, but just barely. Your phone buzzes twice, maybe 3 times, but you don't check it. It's sitting screen down on your nightstand like a child in timeout. And for once, it can wait. Because part of you is still in that valley, still smelling wood smoke, still hearing the low hum of someone weaving animal sinew through hide with a bone needle. And this thought occurs, they didn't need reminders to rest. No apps, no countdown timers, no hacks, just rhythm. Just the pulse of the sun and the slow settling of birds into silence. You live in a world where sleep is scheduled like a meeting, where rest feels earned only after exhaustion. But the Neanderthals, they slept when it was dark and safe. They listened to the world, and when the world whispered pause, they didn't argue. You envy that. You who checks email after midnight. You who wakes up not from dreams, but from notifications. You who forgot what it feels like to fall asleep without guilt. And now, for the first time in a long while, you're wondering if maybe they weren't behind us at all. Maybe they were just on a different path. One with fewer loops, less noise, more moss underfoot. Because if you zoom out, way out, you begin to see the joke. We call them primitive, but they didn't invent burnout. They didn't need digital detoxes. They didn't build systems that reward overwork and punish stillness. We did. They didn't monetize your attention. We did. They didn't have existential crises about productivity. They were too busy living. They didn't have to prove they deserved rest. They just rested. And here you are lying in bed, scrolling the story like it's something to get through, not something to feel. Still measuring time and half-watched episodes and caffeine cycles. still wondering if you've done enough to sleep in peace. But Neanderthals, they slept like the body was a temple, because it was. And maybe that's the real Stoic lesson here, not the cold endurance or the Spartan toughness we so often idolize, but the acceptance, the surrender, the quiet courage to say this is enough. Right now is enough. You don't need to master everything. You don't need to outsmart nature. You don't need to outachieve your ancestors. You just need to be in this moment fully, like they were. Like the Neanderthal boy who spent 15 minutes watching the wind bend a single reed. Not because it was a task, not because he was collecting data, just because it was. That's presence, that's attention, that's wisdom. You look around your room now, same space, different eyes. The fan hums like a cave wind. The streetlight casts soft shadows on the wall like fire flickers. Your blanket presses against your chest like a pelt warmed by the embers. You're not as far away from them as you thought. You remember how you laughed at that museum figure, the knuckle dragger, the stereotype? And now you realize the real joke. We thought they were simple, but they had what we lost. Sleep without screens, strength without arrogance, grief without hiding, cooperation without contracts, time without clocks, joy without performance. And when the end came, they didn't rage. They bowed out with the same quiet grace they brought to everything. They left behind tools, yes, but more importantly, they left behind proof. Proof that life can be lived without conquest, that humanity doesn't have to mean domination. That existence itself is enough if you do it with care. You close your eyes. Not to escape, but to return. Because sleep for them wasn't a retreat, it was a ritual. A way to say, I trust the world to hold me for now. And so do you tonight, just for now. The fire's low now. You're lying on your side, curled slightly, one arm under your head like it remembers being pressed into soft earth. You're not fully asleep, but you're not fully here either. And in this in-between space, a memory begins to speak. Not your memory, theirs. A long silence wrapped around a Stoic truth. You see him again, a Neanderthal man, probably in his 40s. That's old for them. His beard is thick, streaked with gray. His hands are scarred but steady. He's watching the sky not because he expects something from it, but because watching is enough. He's not worried about what comes next, because he knows something you're still trying to learn. You do not control the outcome, only your preparation. That's the Stoic core, isn't it? Epictetus would have nodded in agreement maybe while sharpening a blade or hauling a sack of grain. The Neanderthal doesn't need to write it down. He lives it. Every day he wakes to uncertainty. Will the hunt succeed? Will his daughter survive the cough that settled in her chest? Will the food last? He can't know. And he doesn't pretend to. But what he can do, what he always does, is prepare. The tools are sharpened, the fire is built, the furs are repaired, the camp is inspected. Each gesture says the same thing, I am ready, even if the world is not fair. That's what Stoicism looked like before it had a name. It wasn't a philosophy class. It was a cracked bone that you wrapped anyway. It was a sudden blizzard that you didn't curse, you just moved the shelter. It was hunger that didn't turn into panic, but planning. You remember that story of the child's burial, the careful arrangement of flowers? What was that if not a form of amor fati, the love of fate, the acceptance of loss without surrendering to despair? There's beauty in that. In a way, Neanderthals were nature's Stoics. They didn't write meditations, they lived them. Without drama, without complaint, without needing applause. The modern world rewards noise. They honored quiet. The modern world asks what's next. They asked what's needed. And sometimes the answer was nothing. Just wait. Just breathe, just endure. Historians still debate whether Neanderthals had long-term planning, whether they foresaw seasons or worked only in the moment, but they don't debate this. Neanderthals knew suffering, they met it often, and they didn't fall apart. That to you is Stoicism. You don't need to quote Marcus Aurelius to be Stoic. You just need to meet the cold without fear. You need to carry something heavy without asking for pity. You need to love someone knowing they may not be here tomorrow and love them anyway. Because that's the hardest part, isn't it? Loving a world that doesn't promise to love you back. And doing it with open eyes. There's a story in your blood now, Neanderthal blood, that hums with this wisdom. It doesn't speak in words. It speaks in the way you catch yourself bracing for winter. In the way you press your hand over someone's and feel the weight of history in that warmth. They weren't perfect. They weren't saints. They were just human, differently shaped, differently wired, but bound by the same silent truths you carry tonight. You want to be strong? Be like them. Show up anyway, prepare anyway, love anyway, even knowing it won't last. Even knowing you might disappear just like they did. Because the Stoic isn't the one who survives forever. The Stoic is the one who walks into the snow knowing they might not come back and does it anyway. You breathe slowly now. There's no fire in your room, but the warmth is real. No snow at your doorstep, but the cold is still out there waiting. And so are you. Ready. Something is settling now. Not like dust. More like an answer. Soft, unspoken, the kind of answer that doesn't explain, it just is. You don't even feel the bed beneath you anymore. You feel earth. Not symbolic earth. Real earth. Firm beneath your back, cool against your calves. Sky above. Or the inside of a cave. It doesn't matter. You're floating in time between them and now. And in that space, just wide enough for a breath, you find what they left behind. Not tools, not bones, not even genes. But lessons. The kind that were never carved into stone, but lived in every gesture, every echo, every decision made under the weight of wind and uncertainty. You want to name them, don't you? Turn them into a list, something clean and Instagrammable. But they resist, because Neanderthal wisdom wasn't loud, it didn't tweet, it wove. So let's sit quietly with it for a moment. Lesson 1, you don't need much, no 10-step routines. No minimalist aesthetic curated with maximal spending, just enough to survive, to share, to carry. A flint blade, a warm fire, a full stomach, a hand resting near yours. Lesson 2, you are not alone. The modern myth says strength is individual. That solitude is some noble badge of honor, but Neanderthals knew differently. The lone wolf starves. The quiet camp thrives. They didn't build fences. They built fires and people came closer. If someone broke a leg, the group waited. If someone coughed, they shared food anyway. Not because they were saints, because they were human. Lesson 3, feel it and carry on. Grief was real. The child buried under stones, the necklace left behind. They mourned, but mourning wasn't a detour from life. It was life. They didn't hide from it. And when the tears dried, they still hunted, still gathered, still loved. Lesson 4, beauty matters. It didn't keep them warm, it didn't feed them, but they still wore eagle talons, still painted their caves, still chose to mark stone with ochre-stained hands. You don't decorate unless something inside you wants to say, look, I am here, I see, I feel. This moment mattered. That's not primitive, that's profound. Lesson 5, disappear with dignity. Neanderthals didn't build pyramids. no statues, no scrolls, and yet here you are lying in the dark thinking of them because they didn't need monuments. They were the message. Live well, adapt fast, leave quietly. You blink now and the warmth of your own room returns. The ceiling, the fan, the subtle vibration of your phone across the room like a bug tapping against a window it can't see. But it doesn't pull you away because you're holding something bigger now, a thread, a hum, a rhythm that was always there. You are not more advanced. You are not more wise. You are simply later. And what will you leave? Not likes, not links, but maybe, just maybe a gesture, a moment of real attention, a day spent awake to the wind, a kindness no one asked for, a stillness before sleep. So when someone thousands of years from now asks, what were they like? The answer will not come in data. It will come in how the fire was kept, how the silence was honored, how the human spirit, ancient and unfinished, was carried forward not loudly, but faithfully, hand to hand, breath to breath. You shift under your blanket now, not to escape the weight of the day, but to finally fully feel it and to let it go. The earth turns slowly. You close your eyes, and somewhere someone 40,000 years ago is doing the same. Not afraid, just ready. End of script. Good night.